Today, we've got Cole Napper with us. Cole is the VP of Research, Innovation, and Talent Insights over at Lightcast. He is a podcaster in the HR space, people analytics guy.
What I tried to do is to write something very practical and evergreen. What's still going to be relevant about generative AI agents, the data infrastructure that it takes to create that and do it effectively.
I just think at this point, we deserve more. Why are we still debating something that's been talked about for so long? My entire career of recruiting has been why are we talking about this thing that doesn't have a meaning? It just makes me want to slam my head against the wall.
One of the things that I've gotten a guilty pleasure off of in this last year is just seeing headlines that I can go and debunk with real data has been fun. And most of them are around college graduates can't find jobs anymore.
Recruiters, do you know those moments where you're juggling 15 roles, 10 hiring managers, and 3 different outreach tools, and you just think, there's gotta be a better way to do this? That's where Grayscale comes in. It's an AI assistant built for recruiters, not just another generic chatbot. Grayscale lives inside your ATS, whether it's Greenhouse, Workday, or SAP, and it automates candidate updates, reminders, and outreach across text, WhatsApp, and chat. I've seen teams use it, cut time to fill by 30%, and cut ghosting in half without losing the human touch. Because this isn't about replacing recruiters. It's about freeing them up to do the stuff that actually matters, closing great candidates. So if you're building a real talent machine, check out grayscaleapp.com and tell them Building the Talent Machine sent you.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show today. We've got Cole Napper with us. Cole is the VP of Research, Innovation, and Talent Insights over at Lightcast. He is a podcaster in the HR space, people analytics guy. You've probably seen him out on the conference circuit. I'm stoked to have this conversation today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Brandon.
Yeah, where are you based and what are you working on?
So I'm based in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I don't know, coming off the heels of publishing a book, always got podcast stuff going on, and then big research projects on the Lightcast front that are coming out early 2026. So really exciting times.
Heck yeah. End of year is always so fun. It's end of year recaps, predictions on next year. A lot of this stuff in HR is repurposed, comes back around every 5, 10, 15 years. We're going to talk a little bit about that. One of those themes that's top of mind for me is quality of hire. I feel like we're jamming on quality of hire again. It pops up into our recruiting media, our HR media. So I know you've got some thoughts around quality of hire. So we'll get into that in the show. But before we dive in, let's talk about the book. What is your book that just came out?
Yeah, so it came out back in August. It's called People Analytics, Using Data-Driven HR and Generative AI as a Business Asset. I think it was very timely for what's been going on in the field. And really, it's not just about people analytics. It's about talent intelligence, workforce planning, behavioral science, what I've been calling the tree of value, where they're all branches of the same tree, but definitely cuts across what's going on in the talent acquisition space very, very highly. And so I think you can't not talk about generative AI right now. But what I tried to do is to write something very practical and evergreen on the topics of, if you pick this book up in 5 years, what's still going to be relevant about generative AI agents, the data infrastructure that it takes to create that and do it effectively. And so I feel very confident about that work. But also, if you're in this space and you care about that kind of stuff at all, it's quite provocative. There was no sacred cow that was left unslaughtered. And so I think that was it was a lot of fun to write, but also if anybody who knows me knows I'm just practical to the nth degree. And so I want to help people do their jobs effectively and meet them where they're at. And I think the book does that quite effectively.
Of that, no sacred cow left unslaughtered. I'm going to hit you with a dad joke. Buddy sent me this today. And this is why cows don't talk. God says to the cow, "You're a cow." The cow says, "Okay." God says, "Your baby is a calf." And the cow says, "Ask me why I'm tired after giving birth." And God says, "What?" The cow says, "Ask me why I'm tired after giving birth." And God says, "Why are you tired after giving birth?" Cow says, "I'm decaffeinated."
Ha! That's good stuff. That is classic dad joke for sure.
Here we go. We're starting with a dad joke because from fellow dad to fellow dad, I appreciate your hustle, leaving the family, going on the conference circuit, being a industry personality takes a ton of energy. Talk a little bit about like your transition. Like you were a practitioner,
Yeah.
now you're doing something else. You're always out and about. How do you balance it all as a working dad?
Probably not. First of all, I don't know if I've found any secret formulas yet. If you've got them, I'd love to hear them. But I'd say I've been a practitioner most of my career. Worked at a lot of really brand name, blue chip, multinational companies. I went into the startup space for a hot second early in the early 2020s. Most recently, before joining Lightcast, I was the head of people analytics and workforce planning at FedEx. So I had a huge mega team over there. And now I'm the VP of research at Lightcast. But that's very much on the circuit, very customer facing, well, not customer facing since I don't have like billable hours or something like that, but I'm out and about a lot talking to people. And I'd say the way that I manage it is I try not to schedule anything in the spring and the fall because I know I'm going to be on the road. Other than that, I don't have a lot of good insights because I'm still trying to make it work. I don't know. What would you say? What do you do?
Man, I'll be honest. I got divorced and that affords me a ton of time to do this stuff. It's great.
Okay, that's one strategy.
Shout out to my ex-wife. She's an amazing mom. Shout out to my parents who are amazing grandparents who help out with childcare since I got such small kids. But no, man, like you got to figure out what works for you. And the reality is I've been an employee. I left the W-2 to go do this thing as well. But yeah, I think sometimes like people they don't see the hustle and what it takes to actually pull this kind of stuff off. I know packing a bag, getting on a tiny airplane. I'm certainly not flying first class, living out of a suitcase for part one of conference season, part two of conference season. It's fun. I'm energized by the connections.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, though. Like, I feel like if you have a finger on the pulse, it makes the content in between conference seasons, so summer and winter, exciting. I'm excited to get in this sound booth and talk to you about what we're learning
Well, see,
about and
that's the
seeing.
thing for me, and I don't know if your world is a little different. The content for me never stops. That's actually the hardest part to maintain in the spring and in the fall is I still got to do everything that I'm doing even in the summer and the winter, except on top of conference season. So putting out the podcast, putting out newsletters, writing articles, putting out these weekly data snacks that I do at Lightcast that cover the research. I think that's actually how you and I came across one another is you've been fooling around in the comment section on those data snacks and those don't end. The wave keeps crashing every week. And so
It's nuts.
it's a lot to manage, but I put together a post a while back. I call it How to Create a Research Factory, which I thought was going to be quite provocative. I guess it wasn't. I guess everybody already knows how to do that. But it was like, what does it mean to actually produce research at the speed that like a news reporter puts out articles?
Yeah.
And having done research my whole career and even in academia, that is not the speed that things work at. And so I called it kind of tongue in cheek a research factory, like putting these out like little widgets. And it's a challenge, man. It's a lot to balance.
Oh, 100%. And like when I see your content that comes out, I don't know if anybody is familiar with Cole's stuff. Like there's a handful of folks that are like 90th percentile content research putting their brain power to use. You have multiple degrees on the wall. I barely have a degree in English as a first language. You are like the creme de la creme when it comes to these ideas and how to build it out. What is Lightcast? What is HR research? Can we just dumb it down real quick? What does it mean in your own words?
Yeah, so Lightcast. So I've been coming from like the previous kind of customer space where I was very familiar with Lightcast because I'd used their data before, right? And that is like a key unlock. If you've got a people analytics team, a workforce planning team, a talent intelligence team, and you're not using labor market data, you're really fighting with one hand tied behind your back. And so it's just like a really key unlock. Now, being on that side of the table is I have God access to the data. And it's like being like I remember they used to have these things like when I was a kid, like Toys R Us would do a thing where you had a shopping cart and you could run through it and grab as many toys as you wanted in a minute. It's like that, but with data, because like I can grab any toy that I want. And what's so wild about it is I can talk about almost anything that's going on globally at any time because of the breadth and depth of the data that Lightcast has. And so
Awesome.
It is just fascinating from a research standpoint because coming up in the kind of the people analytics workforce planning space, I'm used to talking about supply and demand, the hiring signals, like what's going on in the business, even things like employee listening and that type of thing. not used to talking about what's going on with Doge and how is geopolitics playing a role in the data center build out in the United States. And we're looking into that stuff too. And it's fascinating. And because all of it ties back to what's going on in big multinational companies, in public sector, state, municipal, and federal level organizations, as well as what's going on in higher education. Because higher education is changing right in front of our eyes or not changing in front of our eyes, even if it needs to. And Lightcast is right in the thick of that, being a data provider to all of those. And so it's really exciting to do this type of work.
I love hearing you describe that because to me, it just sounds so nerdy. God mode on data access. Dude, I love that.
Dude, you invited me. This is my world. This is what I like. I'm not a talent acquisition guy, so if I'm nerdy to you, it won't be the first time or the last time I'm called that.
No, and it's so good. It's like nerdy in the best way because I think talent acquisition, recruiting, it needs to bring a little bit more data into how we operate because we're quickly moving from this role of order taker, recruiter, white glove service, internal resource to trusted talent advisor. And when I look at some of the data and have conversations with talent leaders, we are like on the precipice of a major shift in traditional benchmarks in the candidate funnel being shaken up, broken, and thrown out. And where I see like the pass-through rate data changing is at the top of funnel with AI. You've got a great brain around generative AI, but like when I start thinking where AI is going to go with candidates, I don't think we're going to interview 20 people anymore at the top of funnel. We might interview like 5 or 6 because we're getting better signal and alignment for folks that actually have the skills when we do the talent mapping, when we do the research, which is formerly known as like talent intelligence. What I'm curious about, and this is where I think you might have an opinion or an insight, is it goes against how the majority of hiring managers behave currently in an employer's market. When it's an employer's market, you can be a little bit slower to go on a hire and you can say things like, "Oh, let's see who else is out there. Let's see what else is on the market." And you can have those elongated interview processes. And because folks in my generation have only hired in a bull market, I think it's going to actually have some sort of conflict between what generative AI is doing, better signal through noise, fewer candidates at top of funnel, and the behaviors that are ingrained in hiring managers in an employer's market where like we're never going to go back to the candidate market. Like it's just, I don't think we're going to get there again in B2B SaaS.
You know what's funny about that is my first job at a graduate school, I was doing workforce planning work coming off the heels of kind of the Great Recession. And that was the last time we were in a bear market. And I feel like half the articles I write in my newsletter to try to explain to people who've only come of age during a bull market is, hey, here's what it was like doing workforce planning back then. And I just kind of repurpose all the learnings I had early in my career when it was a bear market to say, hey, this is what to expect now. And people go, this is so helpful. And I think like not enough is said about the economic conditions and how do they affect the supply and demand characteristics of the workforce, because things never change. I was on a podcast the other day and the hosts were like, what are the problems that HR and talent are facing? And I was like, the problems never change. How we address them is what changes, right? The data that's available, the technology that's available, the skill sets of the humans that are available. But the problems don't really change all that much, except sometimes the economy is great and sometimes it's not so great. And that is really the circumstances one of the key circumstances that makes things a little different.
I really appreciate that because I even think about it as like a finance department. If you're an FP&A and you're a director level FP&A in a mid-sized company, enterprise company, you're probably like between 30 and 40 years old. And that's literally that's my generation that came into the workforce right after the Great Recession. So even when we think about financial planning, we need those insights. We need that data. So I'm glad you're talking about that too, because I think we get into these moments of hyperbole where it's like the world is ending, like unemployment is at the highest rates it's ever been. Like you see this stuff online. It's like, this just isn't true. It's just not true. I think people want to get engagement and rage bait, which is the word of the year, around just getting people riled up about work. And there's an interesting sentiment that I've seen, particularly in the recruiting side, is like candidates hate work, recruiters hate their jobs. It's if you go into the algorithmic feedback loop of hiring on the internet, that's what it'll tell you. And I just think that there's a little bit more optimism and pragmatism that comes from folks like you in the data side of the world, which is this little niche of HR and the world of work, but it's critical in how we hire people. And what I want to hear from you is, can you talk a little bit about people analytics, how it operates in an enterprise organization at maybe some of these blue chip companies you've worked for? Like, how does a recruiter see a people analytics title or counterpart in their company and make sense of the work they do?
Realistically, other than the in-state products that a people analytics team generates, like things like dashboards and reports and things like that, most recruiters aren't going to talk to a people analytics person. Their boss or their boss's boss are working with people analytics folks. And I think that's probably how it should be, just because we're not that great at happy hour, let's be honest. But we are good with data and we are good at creating insights. I'll say on the Lightcast side of things and how you're saying like bringing facts into the situation. One of the things that I've gotten a guilty pleasure off of in this last year is just seeing headlines that I can go and debunk with real data has been fun, like super fun. And most of them are around like college graduates can't find jobs anymore. And so I just go and do a little research report really quick. Doesn't take all that long. And we find actually a ton of them are getting hired. It's just college graduates with certain degree profiles, which were already unemployable, are now super unemployable. Like so just bringing facts into the situation has been super fun. And it's like, those were the things I was doing internally in people analytics and sharing again with my talent intelligence colleagues or with the recruiting team or with, frankly, like the leaders of talent acquisition and FP&A. Now I get to share it with the world. And it's so fun to do that kind of thing.
Love that. I love that. And this is where I sound like a crusty millennial, where it's Gen Z, yes, they may be struggling to find jobs, but it's because they chose a really stupid degree to spend $200,000 on as a lifestyle signal for whatever brand name school they went to. The reality is, if you have skills that are valued in the market, you will get a job. It's up to humans to adapt to those needs. I mentioned I barely have a degree in English. I was writing in a newsroom my senior year of school, and that job in a different market would have led to a full-time offer from an internship program, but they laid off 30% of the newsroom. I was running a blog in 2008, 2009 or something. And it's, of course, like there's changes in the market, but I had plenty of friends that would go to law school or went on and did other things. But academia is a interesting institution right now. I know you have a couple of degrees from the same school. I think there's a time and place for higher ed, but higher ed is in this really interesting moment where the product itself hasn't innovated. The cost is through the roof. Higher ed perpetuates higher ed for higher ed's sake. If you're a strong student, they're going to want to sell you more degrees. What thoughts do you have on young people entering the workforce and maybe just ideas or forecasting the role of higher ed in the world of work?
It's funny you say that. Like, I try not to make pontifications if I don't have to. I like to have data before I say something. One of the things that I will have data on in 2026 that I don't have yet is I've had this hypothesis that a lot of higher ed could be disrupted with the right kind of practical skills-based learning. And so I'm actually creating a people analytics and AI data-driven academy right now with a few other people and launching it in 2026. And I'm curious to see like what the reception to that is. I think it's going to be awesome. I think there's going to be a groundswell, but I really don't know. And so I don't have any data on that yet, but I'm curious to see folks who maybe even had a bachelor's or had a master's and how they react to say how this kind of practical skills-based applicable learning fares against maybe a MBA or whatever engineering, computer science degree or whatever people are doing to get into this space right now. And I guess the short answer is I don't know, but I'm curious to see what comes.
Yeah, that sounds really cool, Cole. Alternative degree programs are so interesting. I think the right ones can take off. I think one of the great failures of alternative degree programs were like coding boot camps. That was like, oh man, I don't know if your perspective's on coding boot camps, but I feel like that was like this huge thing where everybody's, it's going to change the world forever. And it's like, I don't know, a single like strong full stack developer that went to a coding boot camp and is now killing it 10 years in.
Let's say this is just my kind of my general thought on learning and education more broadly, not just coding boot camps, is that if you have 100% pass through rate, you learn nothing. because that means there's no differentiation, which means it wasn't hard, which means you didn't learn anything, right? And so I think the balance that you have to find, which I think higher ed has gotten out of whack on, is you have to find a high enough barrier threshold that people have to cross to make whatever that they're learning difficult, and therefore stretching a person, and that they actually have to provide effort and real kind of cognitive resources to do that, but also not so high that like you have a 1% pass through rate. And so I think that higher ed's gotten out of whack on that, and I think the coding boot camps are out of whack on the completely other end of the spectrum where you learn nothing and there was just like a certification that was worthless. But I think that's where you're ripe for disruption to come along and say, what does that look like in the next phase of technology being implemented in this space?
Yeah, and I always think about the reality that it's never been easier to make money and it's never been easier to learn.
Yeah.
We have so many platforms and channels for learning and so many like platforms and ways to make money. I don't know, like I'm like looking at my phone. You can go get daily pay from running DoorDash around town if you need to make $50. You can turn your car into a taxi and make $100 a day. You can go on TikTok and in 6 months, if you have a great brand, start getting checks from ByteDance. Like I know creators that make 5, 10K a month from ByteDance just for talking into their phone. That didn't exist when I was 20 years old trying to make money. I had to go wait 2 weeks for a paycheck and go do manual labor outside.
Yeah. Maybe you should get on TikTok, man. I don't know what's stopping you right now.
I can't. I posted the other day about all the channels I'm not on. And I think Salvador Dali said, I don't do content, I am content.
Awesome if he actually said that. That's really cool.
No, okay, switching gears, let's talk a little bit about dashboards, future of people analytics. So we've talked a little bit about emerging roles in the workforce. You can come in, be a data analyst, maybe have a master's degree, get hired at a company to spin up dashboards and do data analysis. What do you think is the future of that entry-level role for people analytics folks that want to be like you someday?
I think it's going to take longer than probably a year for this to fully happen. But I think the term people analytics is going to go away. And I think two things are really going to replace it, probably in the short term. The first thing I've been calling AI workforce transformation. Because if you look at, there's a lot of these AI workforce transformation functions cropping up. You look at the skills that they need, and it's like the exact same skills as people analytics. So it's like the ability to use data, the ability to use technology, being AI native, using change management in the real world. It's like people analytics teams have already been doing this. So I think that there's going to be a rebranding that's going on there. But in the longer term, I think this concept of work intelligence rather than workforce intelligence or workforce planning or workforce analytics, work intelligence. Like, what is the intelligence of how work gets done and what are the role that human beings play versus technology and AI agents and ad nauseum, use your new AI hot word here. I think that's going to be the really hot thing. And I think the concept of people analytics, probably that term will be on the way out within the next 5 years.
That's a good prediction. I dig that. You heard it here first, folks, unless it's a prediction in the book that was published in August. But no, it's interesting because I think about it from a hiring perspective. When a recruiter looks at a resume and they see like MS Office or Adobe, that stuff's just table stakes. I think what you described is going to be table stakes for the skill sets of somebody that's going to be employable in like knowledge work moving forward.
Yep.
And in addition to that, the one thing that I don't think is going to go away is like decks. I feel like people are just going to be like living and breathing by decks and storytelling around data because it's like, what do we do once we have access when we're on God mode to this data? If like we're using our LLMs to pull data and research and communicate with data, well, it's like we're going to package that into some like AI deck and we're just going to be like funneling decks to our skip level in Slack. And so I think it's just going to evolve.
We're all going to be using AI to create our great decks, and then the other person is going to be using AI to decompact like what all's in the deck to distill it down to a few bullet points. And it's, wow, a bunch of unnecessary AI slop that's in shitification and all of the other words that people are talking about now.
Yep, exactly. Not to mention the electricity and carbon emissions of all of this work.
No kidding.
What else is in your book that you are just like brush off your shoulders? You're like, that was something good I said that you want to talk about?
This probably won't be as relevant for your audience, but is pretty provocative for people analytics folks. As I said, they need to pay for themselves. They need to be a profit center, not a cost center. And that is, again, table stakes right now. I think that if you look at the head count, if you tracked it over time, the head count of people analytics teams peaked in 2022 and has been falling and leveled off since then. And the reason why is because the teams who didn't pay for themselves and didn't think that was important, they've been culled the way of the dinosaurs, right? And the teams that have continued to focus on the ROI of their function, they're doing as good as ever. And I just wanted to, I've been chiding people about that over the last few years. And instead of doing that, I thought it'd be much more productive to create a playbook on how to do that effectively and really empower the folks who read the book and, frankly, the HR users who might not have any kind of knowledge about people analytics on how to do that effectively. And I think it's been really positively received as a consequence, because that's a tough message to convey, frankly. Folks didn't want to hear it. They don't want to change necessarily. And I think it was enough honey to make the medicine go down that helped it be quite effective.
Okay, that's cool. We talk about that in recruiting all the time. HR recruiters love to talk about, oh, recruiting is not a cost center. It is. What else is a cost center? Sales payroll. So the
Yeah.
people that are making the money, that's technically a cost center. We can't redefine like gap. Like your finance team is going to look at you and assume you're an idiot if you say this kind of stuff. How do you get that buy-in? It's great to rally the base, but like when I hear recruiters say, oh, we're not a cost center, it's okay. You can also add value. So talk a little bit more, unpack that idea of people analytics paying for itself.
Well,
I don't think there's anything
I
wrong
have
with
this
being a cost
rule.
center.
It cuts through all the noise, and it's not pandering to the base at all. I promise you, they didn't want to hear it. Is you got to pay for yourself 10 times over every year with real dollars and cents.
Okay.
Tally up all of your costs. Let's say you're a reasonable sized team. Maybe it's $1 million a year. Okay. Now you got to bring in $10 million a year. Great. You're now a profit center. You're not a cost center anymore. And the thing that I think is surprising to most teams who've tried to finally like go after that kind of target is how wildly easy it is. Everybody assumes it's going to be like super hard. It's not hard. It's so easy.
How do you do it by not spending money?
It's not about not spending money. It's about proving the value of the work that you've done in other parts of the business, generally speaking. Because people analytics teams, they don't actually, if you want to reduce its cost, you just cut people or cut the technology spend, but you can only cut so far and still have a function itself. And so you can't, I always say you can't cut your way to growth, right? But what you can do is provide growth in other parts of the business. And so one of the things that a lot of people analytics teams do is they only focus on risk mitigation. And it's really hard to quantify the impact of risk mitigation of something that never happened. And so I say, that's fine, keep doing that type of work. But also, what if you help the company sell more widgets, right? What if you help the margin of the company increase? What if you did these type of things? And people analytics teams don't generally think in those terms, but once you do, you start seeing like an orchard of low-hanging fruit all around you.
Break that down like a layer further. So people analytics person is partnering with, say, head of sales, headcount planning, budget expense. What would be in that dashboard? Or even in recruiting, what would be in that dashboard that a people analytics leader would be tying to revenue generation?
Sure. So you use a sales function. What if you quantified the value of sales leadership? What if you identified every poor sales manager who was causing their team's productivity to go down? And what if you implemented ways of improving that? Very simple thing. Almost any people analytics team at any organization can support that type of work. There's many different remedies of how to fix that. You can choose your own adventure on how you go about doing it, but then you quantify the impact pre and post. So you say, this is what it was, this is what it is now. We can attribute at least a portion of that to the value that people analytics brought to the situation. And then we put that cash in the bank and we say, great, this is going towards our paying for ourselves 10 times over goal. Thank you. And maybe have another.
Love it. I love it. Let's talk a little bit about the roles we're recruiting. So average recruiter, individual contributor probably doesn't interact with the people analytics team. They may know that it's Susie in an IC role in somebody else's like dotted line org chart. But when I hear you talk, it's like people analytics has an eye on everything. They are like the man, was it the wizard behind the curtain?
Oz?
What is in Yeah. What is in that dashboard that People Analytics is reporting up to the executive team about recruiting?
Sure. I would say they're probably going to want to talk. I'm just going to try to bait you here. They're probably going to want to report at least two things. One would be the quantity of hire, and the other would be the quality of those hires. You want to talk about that?
Let's do it. Let's do it. There's like literally nothing more I would like to talk about than quality of hire.
I will let you set it up. I'm just trying to tee you up to talk about what you want to talk about.
No, okay, so quantity and quality. So quantity, like obviously we get that. How do we balance speed to hire with great post-hire outcomes? But before I rant, why don't you share a little bit about what is quality of hire? Why do we always talk about this?
I've been give me a little rope here for a second. I was actually thinking about this earlier of like why this matters. If you go back to the previous era of college football, I'm a college football fan.
Okay.
For whatever reason, middle-aged men who like college football are obsessed with football recruiting. And so there's like whole websites dedicated to it. And they score athletes on whether they're a 5-star, a 4-star, a 3-star, a 2-star. And every team, when signing day comes along, they want to know how many people did we sign and how many 5 stars and 4 stars and 3 stars did we have. You know what that is? That's quantity of hire and that's quality of hire. And so the star rating is like how good are they? And the number of the recruits that you had that fit each of those definitions is the quantity of the people that you brought in. And people love that stuff. Now, why do people not like it in recruiting functions versus in college football? And the reason why is because in college football, like the director of recruiting operations, who would essentially be the equivalent of the recruiter here, they're not held accountable to the number of 5 stars that are brought in. The head coach is, right? They're the one with their head on the line. But in corporate America, for whatever reason, the hiring manager or the hiring manager's boss, even sometimes, isn't the one held accountable to the quality of hire. It's the recruiting manager, i.e., the director of football operations. And so the accountability of quality of hire is off kilter. And I think that's why recruiters are somewhat against it. And the other reason why they're against it is because for good and bad reasons. One is they like, for whatever reason, people have been trying to force feed them with like definitions of quality of hire that are universal. And everyone who does this work says, yeah, but that definition doesn't apply to me for the following reasons. Just like anybody in football would say, yeah, but Tom Brady wasn't a 5-star recruit and now he's like the best quarterback in NFL history. I disagree with the quality ratings in football. That said, that there's still most first-round draft picks in the NFL were previous 5-star high school recruits, right? So it's not perfect. It's directionally correct. I always say I am short quality of hire definitions and long quality of hire frameworks. And so the things that go into creating a calculation for how a recruiter or a talent acquisition team or frankly hiring managers themselves should be thinking about this is like, how do you segment quality? How do you split subjective versus objective data? How do you do this? Do you do it based on individuals or aggregations of the data? Do you do it based on direct work, like you're hiring factory workers and you count the number of widgets that they made, or indirect work, like a human resources or a marketing or an IT person, where there's less direct ways of quantifying their work? And what's the time period? Is it a week after they're hired that you assess this? Is it a month? Is it 90 days? Is it a year? And so if you look at that, and then how tolerable is being inaccurate? Does it have to be rounded down to 3 decimal points before we accept it as like some kind of definition? Or can it be, again, directional in nature? And so we know, yeah, they were pretty good, thumbs up. They were not so good, thumbs down. Is that okay? Is that acceptable? And that framework, if you're willing to discuss it, I think becomes much more palatable than just saying we have a universal definition of quality hire. We figured it out. We know the one true way. No one else knows. And then everybody always disagrees about it.
I think that's awesome. Thank you. Directionally Correct. That's just like a good name too. You hear, God damn it, that's a good name for a podcast.
I'm so glad we found it. I'll be honest with you.
No, the thing with quality of hire is you've talked about like making a business impact, speaking the language of the business. The problem with quality of hire is it's a phrase, but outside of the context of a phrase, it doesn't actually mean anything in the business. And what I mean by that is every other business group has a universally accepted top line metric. So their phrase that their leadership team talks about actually means something. And I feel like quality of hire is a disservice to the thousands, the tens of thousands of folks that do great business-oriented work that don't have a universal accepted phrase the way their counterparts in sales or customer success. I just think at this point, like, we deserve more. Like, why are we still debating something that's been talked about for so long? My entire career of recruiting has been like, why are we talking about this thing that doesn't have a meaning? It just makes me want to slam my head against the wall.
Yeah. You deserve better. I agree, Brandon. Right?
Thank you, Cole. Can
You're
I send
welcome.
you my insurance for this therapy appointment?
If you want. Here's what I would say. So having done a lot of work in manufacturing in my career, there's this concept in manufacturing called the hidden factory. Have you ever heard that concept?
No, but I thought you were going to say Kaizen because you worked at Toyota.
I did work there too, and that is a concept. Hidden factory is like the real rules behind how the factory actually runs, not the rules that are in like the standard operating procedures. And so it's called the hidden factory. But I think this concept applies to almost any area of the business. It's like the unspoken rules of how your business actually runs. I think most businesses have the unspoken rules for what they mean by quality of hire for their particular function. It might be, oh, they flamed out after 90 days. We had to get rid of them. Or, oh, like a quasi NPS type of score. Would I recommend them again? Would I not recommend them again? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Or what did the hiring manager say? Does the hiring manager believe that they're like what they expected them to be? Or frankly, is it like a no call, no show on the first day in a high volume like call center role or whatever it may be? Everybody's got their hidden factory definition of quality of hire. My prescription for that is just put it on paper. If it's on paper and it's already in your hidden factory, people are already going to accept it because they've already been using it without having a name for it.
I like that idea of the hidden factory. What's not hidden when it comes to managing post-hire outcomes of employees and then even trying to quantify it and tie it to a recruiter's SLA are a couple of things we've already talked about.
This is where your people analytics team actually does come in, because that should not be the recruiter's responsibility of figuring out all this like data procedures and governance and making sure you have the right calcs and what's the quality of the data. Put that on your people analytics team. That's their responsibility and they should be delivering to you. And if they're not, that needs to change.
My hottest take is I think it's a waste of OpEx. I think doing this work is a waste of OpEx for a couple of reasons. Like, one, it's a trailing indicator or a lagging indicator.
Yeah.
But the two very obvious things that impact an employee's post-hire outcome beyond motivation to do the work itself, which is near
Which can actually be a
impossible.
component in quality of hire, by the way. I've seen that happen.
Absolutely. There's some whiteboard thesis around that. Market changes, economic headwinds. So what's going on at that government, that fiscal policy, and then speed of innovation within the sector that the company you work for is categorized in.
Have you ever heard anybody talking about talent density lately?
Yeah, we talk a lot about talent density right now. And it's, we're building a payments platform. Let's hire Stripe folks.
Yeah. In most companies, it's like, what is the density of the high performers that you have? All that is quality of hire played out after hire. And so executives already care about it. They just don't like quality of hire is a leading indicator of talent density. It is a lagging indicator of recruiter effectiveness, though. So it's both a leading and a lagging indicator to things that matter. And the thing that most executives don't care about is they just don't attribute that their talent density is actually caused by having a good recruiter and hiring process and hiring manager and bringing in the right people and sourcing the right candidates and having the right intelligence and all of that goes into the value proposition of how talent acquisition teams bring value. And I want to be generous to you guys. I know you bring a bunch of value. It's just you've got to be able to tie it through the whole value chain of there's this concept called the employee lifetime value. I'm a huge proponent of it. And it's taking the entire life cycle of an employee and then quantifying the value of them at every step in that life cycle. Most people don't look at things that way, and therefore they don't see the value of the recruiters because they think that it all ends with the SLA, and that's not where it ends.
Really appreciate that you indexed on it being a leading indicator for like talent intelligence and market research and sourcing to say, hey, how are we going to get these 5 highly aligned folks under that hiring manager's calendar in Q1. And that puts quality of hire and people analytics a little bit more in the driver's seat. I think the piece that I'm curious about around quality of hire and talent density and market mapping as a leading indicator, it actually goes back to football. And I'm in Denver. Mike Shanahan, one of the legends, built a dynasty. He also had a high volume of coaches that went on to be head coaches in the NFL or the NCAA, 16 actually. What's interesting is out of all of the seasons, it's close to like 3/4 of the seasons played were in winning seasons. So when we think about, hey, this is a great coach, but the team sucked at the time that they were there, they went through moments of adversity. So I think the gap that we have right now for quality of hire as a leading indicator is like, cool. You worked at Stripe. When did you work at Stripe? What did you do at Stripe?
Yeah.
What will the people at Stripe say about you for the impacts you made at Stripe? Not just evolving quality of hire into a leading indicator by logo slapping, because we have had that basically in perpetuity. It's the whole idea of a higher education, top 20 computer science degree, or you went to Harvard, you're ex-Harvard.
It's credentialism. Right?
Yeah, credentialism.
And you notice when I listed off my quality of hire definition, nowhere in there was credentialism.
Yeah, but if you think about it, if we're going to hire folks from like talent dense places, like it's just credentialism punted somewhere else in accountability.
Exactly. Early in my career, I worked for a company, they called it an academy company. And he said, you can either come here and be the CEO here or be a CEO somewhere else, because they listed all the companies where their alumni went off to be CEOs. And it's, but if you're those other companies, if your whole recruiting strategy is just hiring from company ABC, you're outsourcing your ability to create a talent factory to someone else.
And I think that's the piece of people analytics that I love for recruiters to become strategic talent advisors is how do we look at the internal mobility piece? What is the people analytics department able to do around storytelling for people who've come in, committed, and made a real impact and then have moved up the org chart or into another department? I think that's what keeps me up at night is like, how do we just make work suck a little bit less for the average employee? And I think we do that by creating like fun, fulfilling, safe places to work where people have a high level of motivation.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that sentiment.
Cole, thanks so much for jamming today. We'll have to talk more about quality of hire another time, but this is a great first foray into it. Congrats on the book. Thanks for the time you've spent today. How can people stay in touch with you?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. Check out Directionally Correct, the podcast and the Substack newsletter. I've got a website, colenapper.com. And if you're interested in the stuff we do at Lightcast, you can find me through that as well.
Wait, you have a podcast?
I have a podcast.
All right, dude. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Brandon.